Hello everyone, I'm Wendell Jones and welcome to this edition of the program Jones and Company. On this program we examine national issues, and there are many issues relating to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs that we want to cover today. And in addition to that, we want to talk about Emancipation Day, and the Honourable Fred Mitchell, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Immigration, he is the Member of Parliament for Fox Hill, where Emancipation Day is extremely important to Foxhillians. And so it is our pleasure to have the Minister on our program today. Minister, welcome again to the program.
All right, thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
Gafrenius, nice to see you here today.
Thank you, sir.
Minister, you've been very busy in recent times with a number of foreign affairs issues, but we want to talk a little bit about emancipation of Bahamians and emancipation in this part of the world first, before we talk about the specific portfolio of foreign affairs and immigration. This is special for Foxhillians, as I said.
Yes, actually, I'm actually, as I'm speaking to you, living in the 19th century, because last year when the Prime Minister was in Fox Hill for Fox Hill Day, which he's come every year since 1998, he publicly challenged me to do a lecture to define or find a definitive statement on the history of Fox Hill. So time's up now, and it's Wednesday of next week at 8 o'clock at Mount Carey Baptist Church. So I've been writing it all this week. And it's interesting to see that all along from the first day of emancipation, there's always been these separate ceremonies and festivities in Fox Hill. And the records show that somewhere around 1857, it was actually recognized as Fox Hill being a separate area to celebrate to celebrate Emancipation Day. And by 1870 or thereabouts, there was a Fox Hill Day, which was developed out of the tradition of the Baptist churches. And there's an actual report in the Nassau Guardian of 1890 which refers to people going up to Fox Hill for Fox Hill Day. So it's been a long time.
Mm-hmm. My father told me the story, and you would understand this because you got Baintown roots, that as a boy, the Wolf Road, they would take Wolf Road. In those days it was a winding road going up to Fox Hill. And they would leave Baintown and go to Fox Hill for a week.
Yeah.
It was a big deal because Africans in Fox Hill and Baintown were related to the Africans in Fox Hill, and they were relatives.
Yes, I was, again, Dr. Cleveland Eneas has a whole chapter on this, and he says that they used to set out from Baintown and go up to Fox Hill for the entire week of celebrations, and he describes what the celebrations were like, and the music and the song. And essentially the festival remains the same today. Now, the modern incarnation of the festival was really created by the late Eric Wilmot. And Mr. Wilmot, I guess in the 1980s, I think around 1987 or so, decided to bring back the old spirit of the festival by combining Emancipation Day and Fox Hill Day, which is the second Tuesday in the month, and Emancipation Day as one continuous festival with an activity every day of the week. And before him, it was Lionel Davis, who served as the representative from 1968 up to 1977. And he brought back the whole plaiting of the greasy pole and the dancing of the maypole into the modern era that we now see. So those traditions continue. And this year, the festival begins with Junkanoo on the morning of August Monday, the 5th. And it'll continue, the festival will continue through the 13th. And we have tried to plan an activity every day. One activity, of course, is the lecture on Wednesday evening. The Prime Minister is coming up to listen to what I have to say to see if I get my history right. And then the next day, the street on which Frank Edgecombe lives, which is called Springfield Road, is going to be renamed after Frank Edgecombe, who is the former representative who served in Parliament for 10 years for Fox Hill.
Mr. Mitchell, what about the African connection? Because I can remember very distinctly Lionel Davis in his African clothes on Fox Hill Day.
That's right, and I remember it clearly too, because the tradition for me started at Fox Hill Day when I was a child, because my mother used to take us up to the Rocas, and it was a great opportunity because I remember sea grapes and ganaps and sapodillies, and I also remember the freedom of children to just run around and eat anything they want, do anything they want with a really permissive atmosphere. So it's connected with like kind of Christmas in the summertime, and so the Africanness of our country is really reposed most, in my mind, in Fox Hill today. Yeah. And of course, I will talk about the fact that Yorubas settled there, and Congos settled there, Nangos settled there, and some of the disputes which arose between the two groups, which resulted in the churches and the various churches you have, and the leaders of those churches. I'd also like to talk about the role of women, the Fox Hill women, and the way they helped to establish the modern straw market that we have, and they were business people. So this little community, when George Mackey left as the representative in 1997, he came to see me in my office early in December or so, November of 1996, to ask whether I wanted to succeed him there. And one of the things he said is, if you do succeed me there, the main job you have as a representative for Fox Hill is to protect the integrity and the cultural heritage of that community. And so I've seen it as my primary job doing that. And I'm hoping, I've reached out to Dr. Jacinta Higgs, who is also writing the history of Fox Hill, so that we can settle a kind of narrative over this. Samuel Fox, after whom Fox Hill is named, is said to have had an estate granted to him in the year 1801 by the then government. He was a free African prior to emancipation. And there was 23.5 acres in the vicinity of St. Augustine's College, and it came to be, or the monastery up on the hill, so it came to be known as Fox Hill. And then later, in 1849, the name was officially changed to Sandilands Village after Judge Robert Sandilands. But even though the name was officially changed, people continued to call it Fox Hill, and Fox Hill has actually survived more than Sandilands Village has survived as a name.
Have Fox Hillians bought into this whole question, what you are about in Fox Hill? There are many people who've moved into Fox Hill who are not really natives of Fox Hill. Have they bought into what you're seeking to achieve?
Well, there are lots of new subdivisions there, but I think I make it plain to everyone who moves there that it is their responsibility to learn the history and the heritage of the area that they're in. Mm-hmm. Because the families that still live there still dominate the area. I mean, from Demerits to Rammings to Fergusons to Davises. George Mackey's family is there. You have Fred Ramsey's family who's there. All of these people are very strong families in that area still, and their families have spread out by descent throughout the community. So even though new people have come in, it is largely still driven by the traditional people from Fox Hill.
Do we really understand real emancipation, Mr. Mitchell? Because you can be emancipated in many ways. Bob Marley talks about emancipation from mental slavery, and you're already celebrating the emancipation from slavery, but have our young people come to appreciate exactly what this is all about and the various levels of emancipation?
They may not have fully appreciated, but I think what is important is for us to continue to expose them to the story, because individuals will come up and embrace the story just as I was as a child embracing the story. So that's our job, is to teach them almost by osmosis. So one of the things, for example, is the Sandilands Primary School, which I think is for New Providence, if not the Bahamas, the oldest continuously occupied primary school, which was on a lot of land owned by Robert Sandlands and donated to the public good for the primary school. The children of Fox Hill largely go to school there, and what we try to do is to teach them what the history is, to teach them the history of the churches, to teach them the history of the people who are there. For example, last year, one of the stories I repeated is, you know, this song by Ronnie Butler, Burma Road, which begins, don't mind Livingston, Josiah's the JP. Turns out, of course, this was a song about Josiah Ramming, who is the grandfather of Johnny Ann Dorset, the former Member of Parliament. And he was a very well-known justice of the peace. And he had a son named Livingston. And the song is saying to people, if you use the right inflections, don't mind Livingston, Josiah is the JP. And that, of course, was turned into a song. One of Josiah's daughters, who still lives and resides in Fox Hill, was telling me that she remembers, of course, when the ditty first started. She thinks it's about 1935 or so. Mr. Ramming started out, I'm told, as a prominent Baptist, and Eric Wilmot writes that it was a great disturbance or discussion point in the village when he converted to Roman Catholicism. You know, the Catholics came along, St. Anselm's came along in 1937 when they built St. Anselm's Church there. And then, of course, later St. Augustine's came when the cornerstone was laid for the new monastery in and around 1946. I think it was completed in the 50s. So it has an interesting and rich history. We have to continue to support it, to make sure the kids know it, to know that they live in a very important place, and with a population that's mainly African, to know of the pride of which people have in their heritage, and to protect that heritage.
Mr. Mitchell, I spent 6 of my formative years in Fox Hill, from 54, 55 to 60. Attending St. Augustine's. When there were no lights on the road, Bernard Road was a winding road, and Fox Hill was considered far. You know, we had fellows who came from as far west as St. Joseph's to come to St. Augustine's. The change that has taken place. And what I'm particularly interested in is the change in the flora. Fox Hill was known for its pigeon plum, sapodillies, mangoes. Urban sprawl has pretty much eliminated that, and so that association with the land is no longer there. How do you respond to that?
Well, you know, the last time I visited this subject, of course, was before that land which existed between the now Foxdale subdivision and St. Augustine's College and Monastery. That used to be bush up to about 2002. And in the space between 2002, up to 97, and in the space between 97 and 2002, it was converted into residential housing because I think the Roman Catholic Church sold the property which they owned. And so as a result, all the tree cover has been removed from that whole area. The only great swath of broadleaf trees that's left is there's a small bit to the west of Foxdale now, and at the back of Mount Vernon on Step Street. And I'm trying my best to remind people that these trees are protected trees and they shouldn't be cut down. But there isn't a lot of support community-wide for protecting trees. I don't think there is a sufficient support in civil society on this whole question of protecting the environment to that extent. So I mean, we talk about it. One of the things I've been trying to do is also to avoid cutting down the silk cotton trees because they are also protected trees. We have a bit of an issue now because at Bernard Road, you know, the roots are coming into the road, so we have to cull the roots. But we try our best to preserve the look of the area by making sure that those trees stay there.
Minister, let's move on. Your Ministry, Foreign Affairs, very important in our country. You have an ambassador to the United States, Mr. Mitchell. It's been very controversial in the last few weeks. We see the opposition has asked a number of questions with respect to it. Why hasn't Dr. Ellison Rumming been confirmed?
Well, you know, you require an argument from the United States, and when they provide the argument, they do. In the meantime, he's doing his work as the head of mission, and he is also ambassador to OAS.
Why do you think it's taking so long?
I don't want to speculate. The United States has its ways and its methods, and I suppose they'll explain them in due course or not explain them. What I would say, of course, is we don't have an ambassador from the United States here either, and it doesn't appear that one's going to be nominated anytime soon either. So,
why do you think?
My guess is the difficulty in getting people nominated through the U.S. Senate, but I see recently that they have nominated someone for Trinidad and Tobago, so I would guess that shortly someone will be nominated, but there is that difficulty. The point is, on both sides, their chargés in charge, and you know, the relations are going well.
Mm-hmm. Have you expressed any disappointment that Dr. Rumming has not yet been confirmed?
No.
Why not?
Well, you know, the methods are the methods, and I just deal with what is. That's me.
The people in the general public, the rumor mill is running.
Well, the F&M dominated rumor mill. I mean, you know, I imagine they're making up all sorts of things. I think I had to issue a statement recently because when the former minister went public, I was astounded. I couldn't believe that he actually said some of the things he said. You know, I think it's just completely baseless, has no foundation in fact, and shouldn't be said. The matter is the processes are ongoing, and they're ongoing, and when they're done, they're done. The fact is the relations between the two countries, those relations continue. They're good. They work well. We have just signed agreements recently. He's performing the duties which he is called upon to do, and, you know, we go along.
Dr. Rumming is performing his duties
as the head of mission, yeah.
As the head of mission?
Yes, right.
Even though he is not confirmed?
Well, he's not ambassador to the U.S. That's a different matter. But as the head of all the diplomats in the United States, that's who they report to. And there's a chargé in the embassy who is in charge of responsibilities with the U.S., the same way they have one here.
And Dr. Nuri is at the United Nations?
He's working at the UN.
He has taken up office?
He has, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We've just recently, we're about to announce, they actually took up their post about 2 weeks ago. Ricardo Trico is now the Consul General in Miami, and Randy Roll is the Consul General in Atlanta.
How do you go about choosing these people? Is it simply a political consideration? Because some people in your ministry, in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, might be offended that they have not been able to move upward. There are some people who want to be career diplomats, and there are some career diplomats in our country who would want to be ambassador or consul general one day.
Yes, and some of them have been. At the moment, Rhoda Jackson is ambassador to Geneva and to the World Trade Organization, and she's entirely a career diplomat. And recently, the Prime Minister, after the former minister refused to do so, at least that's what the file reflects, has appointed Marilyn Zonical as an ambassador at large. So, you know.
What does that mean?
It means that her diplomatic rank is the highest that she can reach in the profession as ambassador, and we decided that that was something that she should get before she retired for her work. But it also allows her the entree at the highest level when she goes to conferences and serves for us overseas. For example, very shortly, I expect that she's going to be given a specific mission, which the Prime Minister has in mind. And she will have that ambassadorial rank when she moves around the world.
Minister, when you came to office the first time, 5 years ago, you wanted to develop a foreign service. Where are you in that regard, given the fact that outsiders, political appointees like Trico and Randy Roll and those have come into the Foreign Service? There might be some people who feel slighted.
Well, the Foreign Service orders have been drafted and done. They're before the Cabinet now, awaiting approval and the sign-off of the Attorney General's office. And if that happens, then the people in the Foreign Service will be hived off from the general public service and have their own career path. So when you were talking about Maryland's article and ambassadorial rank, that will be the top rank for the career path. Instead of now going through, you know, first assistant secretary and undersecretary and permanent secretary. They'll have their own rank, which ends up being ambassador. And of course, ultimately, you can be director general. But of course, that's usually a political appointment, which is at the top of the heap.
But Bahamians entering the Foreign Service would want to know that they can be consul general, rather than the whatever government it is, bringing in some political appointee to be consul general. You can understand the ambassadorial situation. But in these positions of consul and vice consuls and things such, shouldn't they go to people who are in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs?
Well, the charter for governance of the Progressive Liberal Party indicated that there would be a mix of both. And that's been our view. But under the Constitution, it says that people who serve overseas for the government serve overseas at the behest of the Governor General on the advice of the Prime Minister. So that's how that goes.
Okay. Godfrey Eunice has a question for you with respect to foreign affairs. But let's take this break on Jones and Company. We'll come right back.
Being an independent insurance agent is a lot of work, but being connected is a must. Whether I'm at home, posting on my website, or whether I'm meeting with prospective clients. I need a fast and affordable internet service that will get the job done and keep my costs low. That's why BTC's high-speed internet service works for me. All the speed I want at the most affordable price on the island.
Hello, my name is Craig Flowers. I was born and grew up over the hill in the ghettos, in the Farm Road community. As young men growing up, we got into enormous amount of fights, as well as we went to the neighbor's yard. We stole a lot of things, but we were fortunate in those days. We were fortunate because we had elderly people like Ms. Maud and the others that gave us guidance. They would have called us aside from time to time and tell us and preach to us that violence and crime do not pay. Today, in this modern world, we still see that violence and crime still does not pay. Therefore, I would like to beg, I would like to ask, I would like to please invite all of the young men and women to join us in this fight against crime. Please remember that when and if this battle is won, everybody wins. Thank you so much.
Here we are on Jones and Company, and today we are speaking with the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Immigration, Godfrey Eunice.
Minister, the Bahamas has been independent now for 40 years. Jamaica, 50. I met an individual in Jamaica who was now the Jamaican ambassador to the African Union. Do you think, Minister, that we as Bahamians appreciate the role of foreign affairs in the governance of our country?
Well, you know, I think that we do, and I was going to tease Mr. Jones here that I always know when foreign affairs becomes important when you all call me to come on a TV show, because I know something must have happened, you know. So it is so on the margins. People think of foreign affairs when they get into problems at the border, passport. You know, just this morning, somebody trying to get back home through the New York airport, and the TSA wouldn't let them in because their passport is damaged, so they call me. So that's my role in life. It reminded me of when Claude Smith was the director of agriculture, and his wife told me that one afternoon at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, someone calls up on the phone and says, there's a cow crossing the road in Coral Harbor, can you please come and move it? So yeah, the margins, passing over the border, visa issues, those kinds of things, that's when you hear from Bahamians on it. But what I've said is our general mission is a quiet one, and that is to make sure that there's a seamless movement of Bahamians around the world, whether for business or for tourism. And so this Bahamian passport actually means something. So we're, quietly working at that.
But what about from the perspective of the role foreign affairs plays in economic development and trade, and creating relationships between countries, bilateral agreements? My time in the ministry now deals a great deal with now that we are ascending into WTO, and countries in the region wanted to create trade.
Yeah. Well, there's no question about that. I can tell you. That's why I said to the House of Assembly and my colleagues that for the next year largely won't be in the Bahamas, because the mission of the ministry now is to find some fresh money for this country. This country is in a capital deficit. There are two sources of capital which are available in the world. One is in China and the countries of the Far East, and the other is the countries of the Middle East. So there are specific outreaches which the Cabinet has asked me to undertake in those areas to try and find some fresh capital for this country. And that's going to require being overseas and settling agreements with these countries. For example, just a couple of days ago, we agreed on diplomatic relations with Qatar, and we are scheduled to sign a technical cooperation agreement with the UAE, which includes Dubai.
Morocco?
And yes, we've also settling a cooperation agreement with Morocco as well. And so all of these states are fairly capital rich. Prime Minister wants people to come and see the place. It's not a hard sell, it's a soft sell. To come and look and see what's here, to see whether there are opportunities either for their sovereign wealth funds or for individual wealthy business people from these areas. And for example, just the recent trip to Singapore to talk about relationships. The buzzword at the COFCOR, the Council on Foreign and Community Relations in Trinidad when we met in May, is leveraging. And that is, how do you leverage or use the 14 votes that exist in CARICOM to get something in exchange for your country? The Chinese are outright with this. They wrote a paper on foreign affairs, and they said we're in Latin America and the Caribbean for two reasons. In Latin America, we're here for the natural resources, the wood, the agricultural products, the oil, the minerals. That's what we're there for. In the Caribbean, we're there because we want them to support the One China policy. And they've set aside $2 billion for development assistance in the Caribbean region, which they'll lend out over 20 years at 2% if you can find infrastructural projects to do so. Now, one of the issues we have, and this is where our public sector and public administration is important, is a capacity issue. There are lots of projects to do, but it's piled up at the door, people banging down and saying, you got to do this, because we have an inability so far to actually deliver the list of projects because of capacity issues. So a lot of things we have to work on, and foreign affairs is the leading edge of that. In Singapore, they're interested in us supporting them to go on the IMO, the International Maritime Organizations Councils, and also the International Civil Aviation Organizations Councils. In exchange for that, the Bahamas has asked for technical support, which they provide for us. So that's why we're around the world trying to develop these relationships, and it's important. And of course, any opposition party, save when we were in opposition, this opposition party has blinders on with this because they think that there's some political message which resonates in making what is really an inane argument about this. It's something that has to be done, And any modern country has to simply get with the program on that.
But you need ambassadors in these countries. Singapore, China. Bahamas doesn't have now an ambassador to China, does it?
There's a charge there as well. So, you know, within the year, I expect to be an ambassador. But I would say with regard to Singapore that we did, in fact, look for someone to be an honorary consul, and that is now going through as a beginning piece to put our, you know, stamp there. And we're looking at actually opening some kind of office in Dubai to facilitate the financial services sector. So it's an expensive business to do. But, you know, we're going to utilize the little resources we have to get some money for this country.
Mr. Mitchell, don't you think that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has been a little bit lethargic in its public education? And the reason why I say that is because I hear it all the time. I go places and hear it all the time. People see Bahamians, officials going to these places as a trip. They don't appreciate the role that you play in having to go to an international meeting or go to a conference, you know.
Until, of course, you don't go. And
right.
It backfires on the country. Then there are huge headlines over here. Why didn't you go? Why didn't you do this? So on and so forth. So
there was an email going around the other day where the Prime Minister of the Cayman Islands said that there's no more travel, right? And one of my good friends said to me, see, no more travel from the Cayman Islands. We need to do the same thing here.
Yes, there's no point in sending 10 people to Jamaica to look at some agricultural school when you can do telemarketing, when you can do teleconferences.
Well, I think it makes a difference, the personal touch. I mean, you know, you can try and negotiate an agreement between the Dominican Republic and ourselves by sitting across a television screen, but I think it makes a difference when you're actually personally in place and you actually look the people in the eye and negotiate the agreements. So I don't buy that at all. And as for your argument about being lethargic, I think one of the issues that we struggle with is, and this was said in our discussions in and around the Charter for Governance, is that there does not appear from the institutional point of view an understanding that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs must interface with the public. It's seen as something that is sort of up here, you know, operating in the stratosphere, which doesn't actually have to do with people's lives. And exactly what I'm doing, exactly where I'm going, and why I'm doing it. Now, of course, the response from the opposition is to come up with these spurious arguments about it.
Yeah.
But you have to do it. You have to do it, because if we don't do it, there's a generation that's going to say 20, 30 years from now, how could you have been in place and not do it?
What do you have? You say that you have a mission to find fresh money, and you mentioned the Asia,
the Emirates,
and the Emirates. Do you have duplication of efforts between yourself, say, and the Minister of Financial Services in this regard?
Well, foreign trade has to do with the actual trade agreements. Financial services has to do with the promotion of financial services. But there are formal things which have to take place before countries begin to act in concert with you on various matters. So one is you have to have the diplomatic relations. Secondly, you may have to set up an office. Thirdly, you may have to put an officer there. Those are the things that Foreign Affairs does. Now, the promotional aspects, the settling of the trade agreements, the sale of Bahamian financial services products, that's financial services and trade. So we, for example, in the fall, will be with Kailas Roll, the investments minister, and the trade minister. We hope to mount a trade mission to Dubai in sometime around the first week in October, precisely so all of these things can be dealt with. But Foreign Affairs is the leading edge. They go in first, they sign the agreements, say we now have diplomatic relations, we're now going to have an ambassador. We're going to cooperate on trade and so on and so forth, and then the other ministries come in afterwards.
You have the many institutions in the financial services sector. Rather than looking to Dubai, they're looking to South America. They're looking to Brazil and places such. I've not heard of efforts on the part of the government of the Bahamas really to tap into what is happening in South America as much as we have heard in the past.
No, that's not so. I mean, Ryan Pinda's been to Brazil 2 or 3 times. The Minister of Tourism's been to Brazil within the last year. I mean, so there have been promotional visits there. I mean, the 40% of the business being booked here, I'm told, in financial services is now being booked through Brazil. So there's a great outreach to Brazil. And we do plan in the next budget cycle. We would have done it this year, but resources restrain us to actually put in place either a consul general or an ambassador in Brasilia to actually facilitate that thrust of the financial services sector. So not at all. And the fact is that given the recent developments in Europe and the developments in the Middle East, where money is getting quite nervous, the Bahamas is seen as a place that is a safe, well-regulated country for which some of their money can come. What it requires, of course, is for us to join the competition there. For example, Panama is already there in a big way. Singapore is there in a big way. And so we need to get there and get our piece of the pie. So that's what, there are lots of fora around for this, but right now one of the big centers is the Middle East, and we would be foolish not to take advantage of it. What my restrictions are the restriction is that the countries with whom we will treat are countries that have excellent relationships with the West, and in particular the United States of America. So that's basically limited to the Emirates, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia. Good relations with the United States, so there's no nervousness about that. We're not stepping into something which is, beyond our usual remit and friends. And great sources of capital through their sovereign wealth funds and high net worth individuals.
Mr. Mitchell, do you think that the Bahamian people understand the role of blocs, BLOC, in diplomacy? And, for example, CARICOM, and the fact that entities, countries like, well, the European Union, even the Chinese, and Brazil, and these countries, like to deal with blocs. But we have this view that we don't want to integrate ourselves with CARICOM.
Well, this is a thorny, touchy political issue. And, we went down in flames in '06 in a big argument and row over this.
CSME.
Yes, of course. Once we signed the EPA, which commits us to the same things, in effect, no one raised a hissy fit over it.
EPA is the European Partnership Agreement.
Yes, the Economic Partnership Agreement with the European Union. And so that's being implemented now. The fact is, as I said, there were 14 of us in Singapore. And so if people interact with us as a group. There's a discussion now going on with Canada over trade relations and how those are going to be settled. Because the WTO waiver runs out at the end of this year for Canada, and they don't propose to renew it. So Ryan Pinda and his fellow trade ministers of the region are involved in trying to come up with a program so that they can settle an agreement with Canada. And I mentioned the Chinese before, that they're here treating with this block of nations.
Right.
So, I mean, that's the way the world is organized, for good or ill. The Bahamas tries to play under us a leadership role in that. We think that we are very well off as a country, relatively speaking. We're pretty well governed, that there's good democracy here, that this is a good place to invest, and so therefore it's a great example for the rest of the Caribbean, and we can take leadership.
But Mr. Mitchell, what concerns me is there are many opportunities that we missed. To give you an example, the Caribbean Farmers Network, was able to negotiate a $20 million grant, not a loan, a grant from the Canadian government for small farmers. Right now, there's a $30 million fund from the European Development Fund for small farmers. We seem to be always on the outside looking in, and we're not intimately involved, and as a result, we don't benefit.
Well, this is about public education again. And as I say, all we can do, I mean, there are capacity problems, real capacity problems, but what we can do, and this is my view about foreign affairs, is I'm trying to recruit younger, fresher people into the system, because they're the ones who are going to drive this forward in the future, and they're going to bring about the changes, because as resources get tighter, and resources are very tight now, it's going to become very important for us to be reaching into these
to access these funds.
And the only way you're going to do it is with new people.
Don't we have these problems, Minister, that Godfrey Innes is asking you about? Because we have not really settled on a foreign policy for the Bahamas. What we really believe in and what we are seeking to achieve as a nation. One government goes in and they do their thing, and the other one comes along and things change. You've been Minister of Foreign Affairs. You had a particular mode of operation. Then Mr. Simonet came in as the Minister of Foreign Affairs and probably...
did nothing.
And did nothing. That's what you... I hear you. Governments seem not to have been on the same page with respect to foreign policy for the Bahamas.
No. I don't think that's so at all. Broadly speaking, the foreign policy of the country has been this. The primary relationship is with the United States of America.
Yes, and that's it. That is what Bahamians know. And as long as you are not offending the United States of America,
okay.
they're okay. But you were saying some things today with respect to
Qatar.
Relations with Qatar and CSME and EPA and the rest of it that they have no interest in. And I don't know if the opposition in the House of Assembly really appreciates what you are saying.
No, I think they do as an intellectual exercise. It's just not an important priority for them. But the fact is, whether it's important for them or not, they have to do it, because it's the only way the country is going to survive at the end. And, you know, I always say this to friends of mine that one time the South Korean ambassador was presenting his credentials to Arthur Hanna when he was the Governor General. And in the Governor General's response to the envoy, he said, you know, South Korea and ourselves, we have, which is right next to China, says we have something in common. Says we're both nestled next to giants, and our independence is only as independent as the giants will allow. Now, I thought that was a very telling comment. I mean, so we know what the reality of life is. But I think even within that, there's sufficient space for the country to expand its horizons to bring wealth creation to the country. And we are exploiting that space to make sure that there are other opportunities for Bahamians to enhance their wealth. I mean, when people talk about my travel, if you talk to individual Bahamians and the places that they go to, I mean, Bahamians are all over the world. And you said, what is the foreign policy? I say again, the foreign policy is this. The role of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to make it possible for Bahamians to move seamlessly around the world, whether for business or for tourist reasons.
Yeah, but it has to be bigger than that.
Well, that's the biggest mission, is for individuals
years,
to move seamlessly around the world.
Yeah, but we've always been moving seamlessly around the world, Minister.
No, with respect not. With respect not. You've got a new class of businessmen now who constantly have new opportunities they have to face, and they often call up and say, why isn't this agreement in place?
Yeah.
Why do I need a visa to go here?
Yeah,
right. So we're working on all of those issues.
Yeah, I'm getting there right now, because for about 10, 15 years, you've been trying to become a member of WTO. You remember that?
Yes.
But your first trip as Minister of Foreign Affairs, that was on the agenda. It ain't happened yet.
That's right. It's, well, our predecessor sat around for 5 years, did nothing.
To become
the only one.
The only one.
Right,
that is not a member of WTO.
Yes, but I mean, a generation, but this is the point now.
Shouldn't that be a priority?
It is a priority, and that's and Ryan Pind is working quite expeditiously trying to get it done. But what I'm saying is, you see, this is the problem now. This is the argument. A generation ago, this could have been resolved for us. because we could have just been in like the other countries. We elected to say to ourselves at that time, one generation ago, oh, that has nothing to do with us. The Bahamas doesn't trade. The Bahamas doesn't do this. And now you are asking a generation later, why wasn't it done? So that's the point I'm not trying to find myself in. Right now, I'm doing all the infrastructural things, so my successors will not say to me, why didn't you get it done? That's me.
You're going to try to sign on to CSME again?
That's a decision for the government, and I don't think it's a priority right now. And what I've said to you is that
Godfrey thinks it's a priority based on his agricultural
well,
conferences in the region.
No, I think integration is a priority, but I'm saying that I think the Economic Partnership Agreement commits us to that. And so we have to cooperate and trade with countries on a most favored nation status. So
we're doing that one through the back door, eh?
That's what we argued.
Okay.
That's what we argued.
Okay. Let's take this break here, this final break on our program. We'll come right back.
In a world of globalization, economic uncertainty, terrorism, culture clash, family disintegration, corporate distrust, youth disillusionment, political confusion, and religious corruption, the wisdom to navigate successfully through life is necessary. Welcome to Living Effectively. Living Effectively, a program designed to provide wisdom, insight, information, and inspiration to effectively face the challenges of the 21st century world. And now, here's your host, Dr. Miles Monroe.
Tuned in on Sundays at 3:30 p.m. for Living Effectively, and for the rebroadcast on Thursdays at 10:30 p.m. on JCN TV 14, Jones Communication.
Hello, my name is Craig Flowers. I was born and grew up over the hill in the ghettos, in the Farm Road community. As young men growing up, we got into enormous amount of fights, as well as we went to the neighbor's yard. We stole a lot of things, but we were fortunate in those days. We were fortunate because we had elderly people like Ms. Maud and the others that gave us guidance. They would have called us aside from time to time and tell us and preach to us that violence and crime do not pay. Today, in this modern world, we still see that violence and crime still does not pay. Therefore, I would like to beg, I would like to ask, I would like to please invite all of the young men and women to join us in this fight against crime. Please remember that when and if this battle is won, everybody wins. Thank you so much.
We're back here in the final segment of Jones and Company today, speaking with the Honourable Fred Mitchell, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Immigration. Minister, the last time you came here, we talked about immigration, which is a hot-button issue with a whole lot of people concerning the movement of people. In recent weeks, you've had a concern on your hand, I don't know if it's a crisis, dealing with the Cuban situation. Cuban Americans have been demonstrating in Florida, marching on the embassy or the consulate of the Bahamas there. Is that being resolved?
Yes, it wasn't necessary for them to demonstrate for it to be resolved because it was being resolved anyway. You know, as I say to Bahamians, you know, the people forget this is cyclical. Every once in a while there are a few people here that the Cuban Americans seem to have their eyes on that they want to get out. And so their idea is to put pressure on us through their businesses in Miami. I always remember Peter Drudge talking about them actually bashing down the door when he was Consul General in Miami, and his desperately calling the Ministry of Foreign Affairs here for help and not being able to get the Permanent Secretary to come to the phone. So that was at one extreme end of it. And this time, when they threaten these demonstrations, the U.S. State Department has been very good at ensuring that the security of our diplomats and security of our people there is actually protected.
Why don't you just let them go? I remember there was a time when a particular government just found a way to let the Cubans land in Miami. Once they land there, they are home free. Why don't you just let them go?
Well, these individuals who are now in our custody were actually paroled out, some of them as long ago as a year, out of the detention center because they were said to be paroled out by UNHCR, United Nations Human Rights Commission, for settlement in a third country. While they were here, they were discovered in May of this year on a boat smuggling their way back into the States. The Coast Guard, U.S. Coast Guard, interdicted them, and they were found them were back into the detention center. Turns out that some of them have expired green cards, and the question is whether the U.S. is going to resettle them. So one of the confusions I want to clear up is this has little to do with Cubans from Cuba. This is really a fight for Cuban Americans to get people who are friendly to them back into the States.
Why don't you just release them? Why don't you just release them, put them on the streets, let them go?
So that we can be complicit in smuggling into the United
No,
States.
you're not smuggling, you're just releasing them.
No, if they've no, you can't. We are a country of rules and laws. You can't just put them out into the street. They came, fomented dissent, disorder in the detention center, so they're now in custody in the prison, and they have a court action. The court action has been adjourned to the 12th of August. They've been interviewed by U.S. officials. The U.S. say they will let us know today, or let us know Friday, the end of the week, whether or not these people can be paroled back into the States. And if that's so, then they can go back into the States.
Okay.
Mr. Mitchell, we're talking about CARICOM. In 1964, 65, I studied in Trinidad, and during the time, Eric Williams was Prime Minister, and who I think is one of the greatest Caribbean leaders. In 1944, he wrote a book called Capitalism and Slavery, in which his thesis was that the slave trade financed the Industrial Revolution. Very controversial. Today, CARICOM is leading the thrust for reparations. What is the Bahamas' view on this?
Well, the Bahamas was part of the consensus at the CARICOM heads of government meeting, which agreed that this is an issue which should be studied. There was a presentation made by the attorneys who represented the people detained during the Mau Mau insurrection in Kenya, who were abused by British authorities.
DAY is the company.
I don't remember.
Legal
the
firm.
name of the legal firm, and they went and they were able to settle this with the British government. So this firm came down and made a presentation. It seems as if they have some principles of law which they can apply. So the issue is being studied by a CARICOM commission, and of course, we've made no decisions about whether we're for or against, but it's just that it's a matter that needs to be studied and reviewed, and then we'll see what the recommendations say.
Okay.
Since you're here, Minister, let's one or two words on immigration. In recent days, we've had immigration officers interdicting Haitian nationals in the South Beach area. A good number of Bahamians are still dissatisfied on what the government is doing with respect to illegal immigration in the Bahamas. The last time you were with me on our program, I think we recorded in the other studio, we were talking about legal as well as illegal immigration here. I think you've said some things about legal immigration, but the illegal immigration situation is not improving at all.
Well, that's the anecdotal sense of it. My sense is that given the resources we have, we're at maximum doing the best we can with regard to the issues which face us.
You're doing the best you can?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so when the average Bahamian complains about illegal immigrants walking through South Beach, fresh off the boat. You say that's the best you can do?
Well, remember, I spoke parenthetically. I said, given the resources that we have, the country doesn't have limited resources. And there's an issue with boats, there's an issue with equipment, transportation equipment, there's an issue with money, there's an issue with manpower. And as soon as the alarm was sounded, the Immigration and Defense Force went off to see who they could get in the net. Unfortunately, given the numbers that they said, it wasn't what they said came in. But this is a continuing issue. So we try as best we can with the resources to meet what faces us. Now, you know that the government's invested $200 million in equipment, in new equipment. We have agreements with the U.S. to help us with this on spotting people on the high seas, but it's a difficult problem, and there's no point in my sugarcoating it. We have a resource issue which faces us, and those are the plain facts.
You have a manpower problem in immigration as well, right?
And if you have 231 immigration officers for the whole country.
231.
Yeah.
Would you think it would help any if some Defense Force officers or even policemen are seconded to immigration for a time, so as to deal with the situation?
Well, the Defense Force now is the front edge of the fight in illegal people coming into the country. And right now, if we want to do any kind of interdiction or document check, the Defense Force is always helping the Immigration Department and the police. So that happens now. But everyone's stretched thin and stretched to capacity, and we know also that we have budget issues for equipment.
Mr. Mitchell, how good is your ministry's intelligence on immigration? Because obviously, Mr. Mitchell, there must be a network that is facilitating these people coming to the country.
Well, there's no question about that, and I asked the question also, but as minister, you don't want to be making public excuses, but I come back to this issue of capacity problems and capacity issues throughout our systems, and this is the great conundrum or issue which faces us in the 40th year of our independence.
You have good relations with the government of Haiti, I am sure. To what extent do you have the cooperation of the Haitian government to ameliorate the situation?
I think you have excellent cooperation with them, but I think they have capacity issues as well, because their reach beyond Port-au-Prince is not very effective, and so I'm not sure that the United States is actually the major partner in this. We've tried to set up intelligence cooperation with them so that when these boats come in from the south, as soon as we know, we speak to them so that they can switch assets around, because usually the boats travel in twos and threes. For example, shortly after the beaching in South Beach, there was one in Exuma a few days later. Again, by the time we got there, we may have gotten 50% of the people that are rumored to have come in. So it's just a constant fight and battle. And to give you other anecdotal stories, I mean, people call me up and they say stuff like, there's a boat arriving every week in Abaco. I mean, we have no way of proving that as an anecdote. We have maybe 8 officers in total, immigration officers up in Abaco. It's a vast area to police. So the country, this is why, in so many ways, it's a resources issue. Manpower, equipment, and we need to do something about it.
The Bahamas lies northwest, southeast. In the southeastern portion of the Bahamas, we don't have the kind of resources that we need. What is the... is there an update on what is happening in Nagua? There was a suggestion that a Defense Force base be put at Nagua.
There's a base there.
There's a base in Nagua.
Right, and there's one being built in Ragged Island.
Okay. How is it manned?
I don't know what the staff complement is, but it's not a large complement, but it is able to do some monitoring, but clearly, I mean, all of these stations could use more manpower and more equipment, and that's why I'm saying the government's made this commitment to get the $200 million to get these additional boats, and plus there's also now an agreement with the U.S. which is also going to help, we think, in actually spotting these vessels on the high seas. So hopefully those things will help as well. But this is all driven to some extent by people who hire these people when they come here, and there needs to be some looking at the penalties again, and some more public education as to why this is simply a bad idea amongst the Bahamian people.
So human smuggling is on the increase in the Bahamas?
I don't know whether it's on the increase or it's not. I would just say it's a constant issue. And it's not just the Haitians, it's also people coming in from Latin America as well.
Mr. Mitchell, it seems as if when we talk about equipment, we seem to be hanging on to boats. But what about technology, surveillance technology?
Radar.
Yeah, I sent Jones.
Radar is not very helpful with wooden sloops.
With wooden sloops, yeah.
But neither is eyesight, because I mean I did the trip on the caravan that the Defense Force or the police have. I did that whole trip one day. It's a 2-hour trip from Inagua in the south all the way up to Marsh Harbor, Abaco, and even though we're flying at 2,000 feet, you can't see anything on the water. It's very difficult to spot anything. So it's not as easy, I think, as people suggest it is. But I'm with you. I don't think that our hands are tied. I think we do have to throw some more money and resources at this, but I think we just hard pressed to do anything about it.
I sent Jones an email the other day, and some people laugh at it. When Nigeria is putting up astronauts, nothing to do with walking on the moon, but in order to detect famine in Nigeria for humanitarian reasons, right? Don't we need that kind of technology to help us detect?
Well, I think technology helps, but I really think that it's manpower that's the thing here. For example, when we were talking about this legal immigration, if we were able to do the number of checks which are actually required, that is, on a constant basis. The enforcement unit of the Immigration Department is 12 people. How do you do that? How do you do that?
But Mr. Mitchell, wait a minute, but I don't care how many people you have, right? A Haitian ship can come from Haiti and sail up the harbor undetected.
Up to Prince George, yeah.
Undetected.
Or the South
Well,
Beach.
I don't care if you have 1,000 immigration officers. That can't stop that.
Well, it mightn't. I mean, technology will help you there, but also boats will help you there because the technology will be on the boats. All I'm saying is that some of the things about which people complain, which is the visibility of these people in these communities, would be stopped if we had the manpower to simply do the checks.
Okay. Minister, thank you so very much.
My pleasure.
We're flat out of time.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate
All
you
you'll
coming
see
in.
y'all in Fox Hill, I hope.
Yes,
Monday
yes.
for Junkanoo.
Yes.
And come listen to me.
Last
on
time
Wednesday.
you went to Foxville, you got dengue.
People,
Oh, boy. We're spraying for mosquitoes.
You sprayed for mosquitoes.
Yes,
Okay,
right.
very good. Thank you very much. Thank you, Godfrey.
My pleasure.
Thank you for watching and listening to our program today. Good evening, everyone.